Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mākina ki uta, kia mātaratara ki tai, e hi ake ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei mauri ora. Before we begin this meeting, I just want to acknowledge the tragic events that have happened today and to really just send a message of aroha and strength to all of the victims and the survivors from the fire this morning, and lots of love to that wider community and whānau, and including our amazing emergency services people, and just everybody, in Pōneke who will be feeling distress at the events that have happened today. And I'm wondering if you would all like to join me to stand for a moment's silence. Thank you, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to this meeting of Kōrau Tōtōpū, and obviously today we're here for hearings on our annual plan. We have a slightly shorter meeting than we anticipated, and there will be, we're not going to have a formal break, but there will be some 10-minute breaks at 4:05 and 5:20. We should be done not too long after 6 o'clock, sort of 6:10, something like that. Yes, please let us know if you intend to leave the meetings. Greetings to Councillor Pannett online, and some, I guess, other councillors, if they have to leave, might need to join us online. But we do have some apologies. Apologies from Mayor Whānau, who has obviously been, deeply involved with events happening today, and Councillor Young, and also apologies from Councillor Free and Councillor Apanovich for early departure. Do I have any other? No? Do I have a seconder for those apologies? Thank you, Deputy Mayor Foon. Nico, is he joining us? Or should we, is it an apology for lateness? Yes. Thank you. Councillor Randall?
Councillor Pannett?
Thank you, that's carried. And are there any conflict of interest declarations? No, there being none, we'll move on to confirmation of the minutes for our meeting held on 23rd of March 2023. Councillor Apanovich, will you second? We'll put those meetings, thank you.
Point out it's got a little bit confusing with the apologies. So I'm an apology for early departure, but it's because it's just got a little bit jumbled in the...
Yes, yeah, we'll fix that. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Free. All right, and we'll move on to vote on confirmation of those minutes. Thank you, and that's carried. And obviously there's no requests for public participation because it's all public participation. So we will move on to our first submitter. We have in person Nick Ruane. Welcome, no mai, Nick. And Nick will have 10 minutes as he's speaking in a informal representative capacity for disabled people in Wellington. As you know, Nick wears many hats with regards to that. So you have 10 minutes, including any time for questions, Nick. Thank you.
Kia ora. Kia ora koutou, councillors. Just wanted to thank Councillor Matthews for that those words at the beginning. I've been feeling slightly heavy in the heart department today with the events that happened overnight, especially thinking about vulnerable communities and potentially members of the disability community in its widest possible sense that resided in the accommodation that was impacted overnight. So thank you for those words. I wanted to address this committee today on the annual plan and particularly in relation to disability community and the impact that could potentially have on the disability community. I just wanted to begin with some broad data just to ground the discussion. There are 37,700 disabled people that live in the Wellington region. And the weekly income from all sources for disabled people aged 15 to 64 is $451 a week. And when you compare that against non-disabled people, all income sources, $1,000 a week. So there's a significant discrepancy there in terms of income. And that comes from the June 2022 Stats New Zealand labour market data. So we can already see there's significant income differences. So Council has recommended for the 23-24 year a 12.3% rate increase. And I'm sure that was discussed upon and angsted over in terms of it possibly could have been higher, I imagine. But disabled people feel the impact of rates increases like the proposed 23-24 rate increase in the form of rental increases. When a increase like that goes through, it is directly felt in the form of rental price increases. Disabled people are more likely to live in rented properties in our city. 38% of disabled people live in rental properties when compared to 30% of the non-disabled population. I could spend time talking about what our rental properties look like for disabled people and their availability, but we only have 7 minutes left. So I'll just focus on the really important stuff. Our homeowners have the ability to split the cost or to ameliorate the cost over the full year. People that live in rental accommodation really don't have that ability. They just are faced with that cost when it comes through. And when you're living on $451 a week, that's tough. So there will be a real cost faced by a disabled community when this decision goes through. And I just really ask you to consider that when you're making this decision. The other issue that I really wanted to spend some time talking about was services that council delivers. Disability community really enjoys the services that council delivers, and they also use them in large proportion and also right across the network, particularly parks, playgrounds, green spaces, pools, libraries, and community centres. Now, I imagine it could be a decision that you may wish to take to increase the fees that people pay when they go into these facilities in order to boost the revenue that council receives, in order to offset the costs that you're facing. However, I go back to the original figure that I put in front of you, that disabled people are living on $451 a week. And in our city today, that doesn't go very far. I also put in front of you that disabled people enjoy the accessibility of our council facilities. 49% of respondents, when asked about the accessibility of our council facilities, said that the accessibility was either good or very good. And I think that's something that we should be particularly proud of when we look at ourselves as a council. That's a good news story. Only 21% thought it was bad or very bad. Now, when I mean, for myself, as a person that's represented and been elected to lead the disability community, if only 21% are telling you something's bad, that's a great day. In terms of council facilities, that's libraries. Libraries either owned, operated by council, including libraries, pools, and community centres. 51% think it's good, the accessibility. So that's, like I said, that's a really good news story. The biggest barrier for disabled people accessing these facilities are appropriately located mobility parks and accessible toilets. Those are the biggest barriers that disabled people tell us that they experience. What I'd really like you to think about when you're making these decisions, the income that disabled people are living on, and the accessibility that disabled people currently experience, which is generally pretty good. I'd also like you to think about greater investment to go into actually removing the barriers that currently exist that you also know about and you've been told about. That's essentially what I'd like you to think about. I'm happy to answer any further questions if you have any.
We do have a couple of questions. I've actually got one to start with myself, which is just to ask, did you have any evidential basis because in terms of the cost being passed on directly to renters? Because my understanding when I've looked into these kind of matters is that rents are not there's a lot of the research supports that rents are not set by increases in landlord costs, but instead are a response to the kind of the wider market kind of forces and set in that way. So I just wanted to check in with you about whether was there any additional evidence you were looking at?
I mean, I think the additional evidence is provided through commentary from Trade Me Property. They suggest that while there are additional costs that landlords will be factoring in, costs such as rental rates will be part of that factoring in that goes in.
Thank you. Councillor Chung.
Thanks very much, Nick. I was just actually going to ask you a similar sort of question. Do you think that the properties where disabled people rent, do you think if there are extra facilities put in for those properties, like a ramp up to the front door and that type of thing, do you think that they're being priced higher than a property without them?
I can't really speak as an expert on this, but what I can tell you is that at the moment there are only 2% of rental properties in Wellington that are accessible. And I would imagine that there would be an extra cost to that because these types of things like ramps, accessible bathrooms, wider doors, there is a cost of putting those types of facilities into properties. They're not part of every rental property, so there would be an additional cost. However, there is funding to put these extra facilities in, but undoubtedly there's an extra cost.
Doesn't look like there are any further questions. I want to thank you, Nick, for coming in today and sharing your thoughts with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd now like to welcome James Sullivan to the podium. I said I promised a cheery welcome. Everyone gets a cheery welcome, of course, not just you, James. And you will reset the clock. You've got 5 minutes, including time for questions.
Yep,
Thank you.
good. Cool. Got 30 seconds, apparently. Cool, all good. Thanks for a few minutes just to talk against the annual plan. I know a lot of speakers like Nick and others will be talking on very specific points. I also wanted to touch on a few of the more general points. Certainly from my experience of renting was landlords didn't really care if the rates went up 1% or 10%. They would throw it up as much as they could get away with. So I'm not too sure landlords really care, that they're just saying words and don't really care. As for the rates increases, it sucks. No one wants to pay more than they absolutely have to. I would love to pay 10 cents and have no change in my services and stuff, but unfortunately that's not quite the case. We've also got the unfortunate point of decades of kicking the ball down or kicking the can down the road. At the same time, we're running into very much the consequences of global warming, and it's here. We're seeing it. We're seeing it in Auckland. We're seeing it in Bay of Plenty. We're seeing it in Canada, where they're like getting 20 degrees in areas that usually get 8 degrees in spring. We're seeing it in Europe, who are staring down a massive drought and heat wave this summer already. And it's not even summer yet. So it's not really just a case of we need to pause and catch up with all the stuff we haven't invested in properly. We need to do that, and we need to start getting ready for all these larger extremes that we know are coming. It would be lovely if we could pause on one of those, but unfortunately we can't because there's so much to do. So do I like the fact that the rate's going to go up so much? No, of course I don't. Are there specific bits that I wish I could like nickel and dime? Yeah, there's a bit here, but here. Overall, it's good enough. And it's very much a case of not letting perfect be the enemy of better. So yes, it's not perfect. Is it good enough? I think so. I think we should go with it. We're still seeing people migrating here to New Zealand and to Wellington, even with all the very public known issues, and not just from low HDI countries, high HDI countries in Europe. People are still coming to here, coming to Wellington, coming to Pōneke by choice. And things like investment in public and active transport modes, it's not just about a healthier populace. That is climate resilience. That is emergency resilience. If a road is, a landslip covers 2/3 of a road and a car or a truck can't get past, people on foot, people on bikes can still get past. We saw this in Nelson when roads were washed out, but there was still enough of a footpath that you could walk or cycle along. So those investments aren't just about, trying to make a healthier populace. It is actually climate resilience as well. So things like that, it's very much I don't like it, but this is the stuff we have to be looking towards, and just somewhat just sucking it up and embracing the suck, as some communities I'm part of would say. So yeah, that's sort of just the general notes.
Thank you. Have you got any questions, councillors? Councillor Free.
Thank you, James. You talked about nickel and diming it. Did you mean like some small adjustments around the edges? And if so, do you have anything that did stand out to you as personally?
Just small, generally ended up being smaller stuff of things around, do we have to do as much business subsidies for various events or this or that? Do we have to put quite as much into road upkeep as vehicles are getting larger and heavier and more dangerous? But in the grand scheme of things, you get to the point where trying to fix all of this or trying to make the changes ends up costing more than just accepting it and doing it. So it's, that's certainly from experience of like my professional life as a software developer. Sometimes you just go, it's got to be more energy and money to fix it. We'll just accept it and continue on.
Okay, thank you.
Doesn't look like there are any other questions. Thank you so much, James. We appreciate you taking the time to come in today. Thank you. We're going to move to our next submitter online. Debbie, if you're ready. Kia ora, Debbie. And as you're speaking on behalf of an organisation, you have 10 minutes, including time for questions. So I'll throw it over to you. Welcome, Debbie.
Okay, kia ora. Thank you all for inviting me to speak at this oral submission today. I'd just like to apologise in advance. I had a stroke a few weeks ago, so I'm kind of got a bit of a stutter happening, so I apologise for that. And before I start, I also wrote my submission down because my brain's not working that flash, so I apologise that I'm reading to you today, but I feel it's a very important situation. So cross our fingers, hopes this works. First, I'd like to acknowledge the people that have perished in the fire this morning. You can have been working with a few of those people to get them in there for housing because they haven't had anywhere else to live. So I just really want to acknowledge the firefighters, the survivors, and the families of all the people that were involved in this horrific incident today. Anyway, I'm Debbie Leyland and I'm the chairperson of United Community Action Network, UCAN. We set up UCAN about 15 years ago when we lost $250,000 from Newtown Union Health Services and funding cuts. But then we quickly realised that it wasn't just a local problem. I know and I speak to a lot of people who are homeless or living in soulless bedsits. I was also witness at one of the series of inquests conducted by the coroner Rob after I was present at a murder of the residents living at Mahora House here in Kilburnie. Mahora House was there for many, many years and it provided accommodation for people that were mentally ill and could not live by themselves in the community, but were not ill enough to be in hospital. The coroner's report confirmed that housing for people with enduring mental illness is inadequate. As far as I know, I don't think there's been any response on his findings. Members of our network have confirmed that housing for people with enduring mental illnesses is inadequate. We also know that it's the same situations apply for other disabled people and elderly people with low incomes in our communities. As far as we know, there is no thorough estimate of the extent and types of need for assisted housing, although the need is recognised in the framework for the Wellington Regional Housing Action Plan. When we have asked about this, we have always been redirected to another organisation or told that the matter is in a work stream that hasn't progressed yet. Our submission is that councillors should know how well assisted housing meets the need in for our people in our city. We are definitely not suggesting that the we are not suggesting that the City Council takes responsibility for this entire sector. We are, though, asking that councillors use their influence to set and achieve a standard of reporting on housing needs that provides a basis for ensuring everyone can have a decent home and gets the housing needs that they require. This reporting has to be based on a real information from those most affected, and general statements of intent or project by project redevelopments is not acceptable. It needs to include close attention to the types of housing, required on what we know directly from actual living and support and accessed housing. I believe our priority should be providing flats and group living arrangements. However, some of these issues relate to neighbourhood designs. Consequently, there is a note at our last written submission related to completing the picture in the 2024-25 year by looking at the situations with day facilities. These can be community support facilities in Wellington City Council flat buildings, They were also used to be drop-in centres in our communities, which was so important in many ways. A lot of them were very important to people in our community, and those that remain, such as community rooms and housing complexes, are very valuable. I hope councillors will give their support to immediately completing the plans outlined in the various national and regional policy statements. When I woke this morning, I found some of my friends are now homeless. We really thank the council for your help, but where do these people go? And where are all the other people going to go as we get older and more disabled? We need to make sure that in our plan, our housing is accessible to everybody. We need it to be accessible for disability, for people with mental illness, and they needed to be treated and respected as citizens of this country and not vulnerable people that cost the government lots of money. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Debbie. And I have one question already from Councillor Paul.
Oh, shit.
Kia ora, Debbie. Thank you so much for coming to speak to us today. I was just wondering if UCAN has been involved with the Rolleston redevelopment where they're doing single site supported housing?
Yes, we have been involved in there, and people seem to be quite positive about that redevelopment. But I think the problem comes with there's so many diversity groups of people that need housing. Do you put them all together? Do you separate them out? I mean, I don't know the answer, really. But I think that Rolleston, it's a lot better than what it used to be.
And just one other question. Would you be able to get in touch with me so that I can meet with you to discuss your feedback? Because we're developing our housing action plan and it's coming to council on June the 6th. So it would be really good to get some more suggestions from you.
That would be very amazing. And I'd be really humbled to be able to do that, because I think it's great that we're all sitting around the table, but there's people that don't have a table to sit around. There's people that are freezing. There are people that are starving. And we're not just talking about beneficiaries anymore. There's people that are working 2 jobs and they try and get home and they can't, put food on their table. Do we take our children to the doctor, or do we put bread and butter on the table? And all these things, kind of go into this whole housing plan.
Thank you, Debbie.
Debbie, I have another question from Councillor Chung.
Debbie, thank you very much. Debbie, I was talking to some people in social housing last night who live in our apartments, our flats. Do you think that the people that you're referring to that maybe have mental illnesses and things, are they able to actually stay in accommodation on their own, or do they actually need someone there to care for them, or someone to call on? Do you need special facilities or just more facilities?
I think it's a bit of both, really. If I was to answer your question in regards to Duncan Terrace Flats, which you guys provide housing, there's nothing there. There's no community centre. There's nothing. And so these people are just living in these little boxes, and they're not really getting much support at all. But then on the other hand, you have people that the state of their mental wellness is that they cannot live by themselves, but they're not ill enough to be in, for example, a hospital or something. And I think that's why this residential community care for people that can't live on by themselves must be included in this plan. For example, before Mohora House shut, it was quite a good kind of plan. People were living there by themselves, but they had their mental health support workers and that tuning up once a week or whatever it was to take them off to the appointments. And that we had a woman there that would come in and cook each day, so they'd be fed. I used to be the cleaner there, so I think the thing is that we have to start talking to each other, or the government departments and the councils and everything, we need to actually figure out first how many people are we actually going to try and help, and how do we move forward, making sure that these people aren't marginalised or aren't put in some horrible bedsit that you wouldn't want your mother living in.
Thank you, Debbie. We're out of time. I just wanted to thank you again for taking the time to speak with us, and just wish you all the very best for your recovery, and we're all thinking of you. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope it wasn't too bad.
It was great. Nothing to apologise for. Thank you.
I'm going to lie down now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye. All right, now I would like to welcome to the podium our living wage, Finn et al.
We've just got, do you mind if we sit there?
You can sit there.
Okay, sit up.
Yep, so you do need to use the microphone, so you get a little green light. It's kind of weird when you're not used to it. And you have 10 minutes, including any time for questions. No, my.
We only need 5 minutes. Yep.
Let's see if you have lots of questions.
Kia ora, thank you for having us here. Hi, my name is Emma. I'm a social worker in Newtown and also a PSA delegate. My warmest heartfelt thoughts go out to all affected by the fire today. Today, the Newtown community is very strong in relationship, and this has been highlighted and witnessed. I have the privilege of sharing a story today of a strong, independent woman who I met a couple of months ago. This mother of 3 escaped domestic violence in Auckland, and when I met her, she had been living in her car or couch surfing at relatives for 5 months. She was working part-time as a disability support worker and told me that she couldn't break into the private rental market and couldn't provide food each week for her tamariki. At viewings, hundreds of people were there, and she was feeling hopeless as she went time and time again. She didn't know what to do or what next step to take. She is a caring, upstanding citizen doing necessary and amazing work, and she feels devalued and disempowered. Structural inequality of unaffordability of private rentals and the rising cost of living is a widely and deeply felt issue in Wellington. It is Living Wage's hope that Wellington City Council maintains its status as a living wage accredited employer, pays the living wage in CCOs, and continues to be a champion of living wage across Wellington. It is crucial that we keep advocating, as everyone deserves to live with dignity and respect, to live more fully without financial instability, and to raise their children. The reality is we talk about how business can't afford to pay the living wage, but tamariki and whānau can't afford it. You, Wellington City Council, have the choice to continue to lead by example and champion the living wage. Thank you.
Yeah, kia ora koutou. My name's Paul Barber from St Andrews on the Terrace here in Wellington. We're been supporters of the living wage movement here in Wellington since the movement began back in 2013. And we've been here, I think, most years to ask the council initially to take up the commitment of paying the living wage, and been back to ensure and ask you to continue your commitment to being an accredited living wage employer, and also to ensuring that the council-controlled organisations and those associated with it also seek to do this. We're part of the faith communities in Wellington that are committed to this movement. We see that as the right thing to do. This is something that makes a real and substantive difference to the lives of working people. It does ensure that people have an income which they can live on with some dignity. As a church ourselves, we are accredited living wage employer, and we have been as soon as really the accreditation system began. So, and we understand the challenge of keeping that commitment going. but when it's the right thing to do, you have to find the way. So I guess in speaking in support of our submission, the Living Wage Movement submission today is thank you for what you've done, and please keep with it and widen the reach of this important tool in reducing inequality and fighting poverty. So thank you.
Okay, we have some questions. The first being from Councillor Randall.
Yes, thank you. Obviously, the council is facing a whole lot of challenges, and I hear you well about prioritising the importance of looking after vulnerable people. When it comes to priorities, though, I want to ask you a hard question, because it's not so much what the council does, it's choosing what it decides not to do. That's where the pain gets felt. So can you outline potentially, 2 or 3 of the services or projects you think the council is doing or providing that are the least important that we should consider, if that's possible?
What do you mean by service projects?
I mean like projects or services. We've got a whole lot of different things that are happening. We've got rebuilding. We've obviously got things like Let's Get Wellington Moving. We've got the sludge treatment plant. We've got a whole lot of big projects. We've also got a lot of important services supporting the environment, fixing potholes, fixing the pipes. If something is going to stay, then it's important to identify what is the thing that is less important in terms of what you believe that we are doing.
Yes, so I appreciate that question, but our submission is on the basis that all council staff should be paid a living wage. So we think that the council, using its buying power, can really influence the workers across Wellington, especially within its employment sphere. So I don't think we'll be categorising what projects are least important, I'm afraid. But thanks for the question.
Fair enough.
Councillor Pennant.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, team, for the amazing work you do. Look, I've had some long-term questions about whether the living wage is viable for households where there's only one income earner, and whether you've thought about that, and also really, while there are affordability issues, whether it's actually enough because things are so expensive now, and whether it actually needs to go up more. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good question. Currently, how the living wage works is we create a number that really reflects the average cost that really exists across New Zealand. So a lot of other nations have it per city, but at the moment in New Zealand, we're just at an average cost across the entirety of New Zealand. We're not at a stage where we're going city by city. So, but I agree, the living wage is just a step in the right direction. We'd like to see, obviously, Wellington City Council going beyond that to even support its workers fully, and it does that in many cases, and we appreciate that.
Councillor Paul.
Kia ora everyone, thank you for coming in to kōrero with us today. I was just wondering, could you remind me who committed to your election asks last year?
Yeah, I don't have that to hand, but I can.
Can you send us an email?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Oh, and I just had a follow up to that. Obviously, there's quite a steep increase in the living wage this year to reflect the steep increase in the cost of living. But have you been finding that councils around the country or businesses around the country have been going back on some of their promises, or are you finding there's like renewed support and commitment to the new living wage?
Yeah, absolutely. We've found that almost all of our businesses at the moment have remained with us, and other big regional councils like Environment Canterbury have stepped up on the day of the $26 announcement to continue doing it. So we'd also appreciate Wellington City Council support in pushing Greater Wellington Regional Council as well. So, but thank you. Yeah, we've had renowned continued support.
Councillor Cowart.
Obviously, this is around our annual plan. So have you heard any comments or anything remotely that this council is no longer going to pay the living wage?
We haven't had any of reflection, but I think it's important that it remains a priority, and that's why we're here, just showing that the Wellington community continues to support the living wage being paid at council. So.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think there's any more questions, so I'd just like to thank you all for taking the time to come in today. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Very much. Thank you.
And actually, Living Wage team, we're having a short adjournment, so now's the time to, if anybody would like to stay for a cup of tea and other submitters, we'll have a yarn. So we're going to break for 10 minutes, and we'll be back soon. Kia ora. We'll reconvene, and our next submitters are online. I'd like to welcome Jared and Catherine from the Property Council, and you have 10 minutes, including time for questions. So I'll throw it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kia ora, katoa everybody. Good afternoon. My name's Jared Earl. I'm the Regional Chair of Wellington's Property Council. I'm joined here by Catherine Wilson as well, who leads the advocacy team for Property Council. Property is the fourth largest industry in Wellington and provides a direct contribution of 10% GDP and employment for over 20,000 Wellington residents. Property Council connects property professionals and represents the interests of 134 Wellington-based member companies across both the private, public and charitable sectors. Firstly, I guess we would like to thank Wellington City Council for its engagement with us. It's something we do continually see and are very appreciative of when we get to have the conversations with the council and being involved in these types of engagements. Our members are all very passionate about the future of Wellington City and really want to see a thriving city with fair outcomes for all. And we look forward to continued collaboration and working closely with Wellington City Council. While we're generally supportive of this year's annual plan, we continue and are extremely concerned about the impacts of the proposed rates rises on businesses. Noting that rates are one of the largest elements of operating expenses for a commercial premises and therefore passing on through to the businesses who operate from those commercial premises, both retail and office types of business. Business in Wellington City will not only face a 12.8% rate increase, but also a 17.8% increase proposed by Greater Wellington Regional Council. We fear that this may have devastating consequences for a number of businesses in Wellington. And it's important to note that through that, there will be consequences that flow on to the rest of the community. Increased costs for businesses will result in a shortage of capital for building owners and managers, meaning that the maintenance of buildings and the upgrading of buildings where Wellingtonians live, work, will be less of a priority for them. Property owners ultimately become forced to recover costs through increased rental levels, while business owners will have no choice but to recover those costs by passing on aspects to end consumers. In other words, the cost of living continues to increase through this. We really care about seeing Wellington's built environment flourish. For initiatives such as the decarbonisation and the improvement of buildings to be undertaken, but put simply, higher costs for businesses and higher costs for property owners will not see Wellington's built environment flourish. Further to this, we're concerned that the rating differential remains significantly high, with Wellington businesses paying approximately 43% of the total rates. Businesses in Wellington have dealt with negative long-term effects of rating differentials since the 1990s. During that time, rating differential has increased 6 times, with a number of companies conversely moving to Auckland for their head offices as the overall cost of doing business in the city has increased. If the rating differential is not amended, it's Property Council's view that this will continue Wellington's legacy of driving away businesses, along with further challenges to development and managed and sustainable growth for the city. We believe that the proportional percentage split of the total general rates, currently 43% commercial, 57% residential, is inequitable and should be reduced. The proportional split in other cities is quite different. For example, Auckland businesses currently pay 31.33% of the city's rates, which is 12% lower than Wellington. This will eventually be dropping to 25.8% as their analysis showed that their previous rating split was inequitable. This would eventually see Auckland's proportional split 17% lower than Wellington's. We have not seen any evidence to suggest Wellington City Council has investigated the general rating split and what specific benefits the commercial sector receives through a higher rates impost. That's particularly important to assess post-COVID-19, with the city still months or even years away from worker capacity to increase to comparable levels to prior to 2020, which decreases the vibrancy of the city and ultimately the viability for many much-loved businesses. In terms of solutions, we've been saying for the same thing for many years. There are funding tools that are available and transparent, can be based on a user pays system, means everyone pays for the services that they benefit from. Examples of these include targeted rates and special purpose vehicles. We therefore recommend that the council reduce the use of commercial ratings differentials and move towards a fairer, equitable percentage that aligns with the benefits received by the end user. Finally, I would like to end by discussing the Johnsonville Business Improvement District. Property Council does support business improvement districts because this means that the local business community will contribute towards a project or service that benefits them specifically. Although we support the bid as a rating tool due to it being ring-fenced, we are concerned that the cumulative costs of the bid and the differential may be extremely difficult for Johnsonville businesses to wear. We prefer to see a reduction in the rating differential alongside the introduction of a bid. In addition to this, we're concerned that the draft annual plan is currently silent on the proposed fee for the bid. Without this information, meaningful consultation of the proposal cannot occur. We recommend that Wellington City Council work with Johnsonville business community in determining what that targeted rate should be. In conclusion, while we support the aspects of this year's annual plan, there are some changes that the council need to make to ensure that the decisions will not result in unintended consequences of increasing the cost of development and therefore driving away future investment within the city. Thank you for your time and happy to take questions.
Thank you, Jared. And before I go, I do have some questions from councillors. I just want to clarify that you are aware of the ratings policy review we are doing, and including a full review. Great. And that the conversations are happening already. Great. That's wonderful. Councillor Pannett, I have you first.
Thank you very much. Gerald, I have to say, I never understand this argument around the differential. You know, at some point, someone has to pay. If the differential shifts to the residential sector, then there's just less money in people's pockets to pay to go to business. So would you see that there was a need to just, well, through the rating review, have a fundamental look at that to make sure that everyone can support everyone and not be at a disadvantage? And that particularly applies to when we get to climate change too. Kia ora.
Yeah, kia ora. So, look, I think from a principles point of view, acknowledging that, yes, everybody does have to pay, but it's looking at that equity and actually the use of those rates. So the study that was done by Auckland Council looked specifically at that equity point, and they determined that a fair rating split was closer to that 25% number, and hence the reason they've been progressively over a number of years reducing that rating differential so that it gets more towards that what they determined was an equitable number. We're not, we haven't seen any similar research from Wellington City Council to really examine the equity of the rating differential. Yes, I guess ultimately, somebody does have to pay, but I guess the example, and it's perhaps a little bit more anecdotal that you could look at, is the investment in Auckland, sort of the built environment in Auckland, and it doesn't take much to head up on a flight and go and see the difference that we see in the level of maintenance, the quality of the building stock, the quality of the operations that are now in Auckland. Is starting to get quite markedly different to Wellington, which is, starting to feel somewhat run down. And it's because there's a lack of capital to invest into the city and into the built environment. So we tend to have these areas where they are degrading quite a bit. We've got some pretty strong ambitions, and we've got some really good property owners as well that want to decarbonise their buildings. They want to invest really heavily into achieving better things for the city from that respect as well. And it's hard to do that when there isn't as much funding available, because the cost of doing business is higher.
Councillor Randall.
Yes, thank you. Look, first of all, Phil, I invite you to send that Auckland study to councillors. I think that sounds a very interesting thing. We should take that on board. So please send that to us. My question is really whether you think that the council has got to work harder explaining the benefits that it is providing to businesses from the rates contribution. And I was wondering if you'd also comment on whether or not the suburban business rates, whether they're getting a better or worse deal, as well as the focus on the CBD.
So from I guess working harder, I think actually providing the clarity is really, really important. I think that's something that isn't evident from what I've seen. So actually providing that clarity to businesses to say why that differential should be the way it is, almost, I think we're heading up towards 3.8 multiplier on that differential. So that's one part. No, I guess there is we do have things like the targeted levies for the CBD, where you can more fundamentally talk to that and say, well, actually the CBD is receiving a certain benefit. And that's when, similar to the business improvement districts, you can say there is a targeted rationale and there is targeted spending that's been that is around a particular area or a district or an aspect. And that's good. It's really, really clear what's being spent in those areas. And that's why, in principle, the idea of a business improvement district for Johnsonville is a good thing. But it's almost a double hit when you've got 3.8 multiplier on your rates, and then you're asked to do a business improvement district as well. And I've spent a lot of time in Johnsonville looking after assets there, and I think we know that it's an area that has much opportunity, but probably isn't extracting all of that opportunity. So the businesses there will be under some financial stress, I imagine, as well.
We've just got one last question from Councillor Chung.
Thanks very much, Gerald. You talk a lot about the differentials and the differences between Wellington and Auckland. Now, when you look at the net comparison, how does that compare? Differentials is one thing, but are rates higher in Auckland or Wellington when compared to the cost of the property? And also, do you think that places like Christchurch and Hamilton, they're spreading out, they're developing new places like in Hamilton, like Te Rapa, and so they're developing new areas out there. So how do they compare? Do you think that's a good thing or better value?
Yeah. So I guess on a dollars per capital value point of view, Wellington absolutely is more expensive from a commercial rates perspective. And look, I think it's probably worth us taking some information and bringing that back to the councillors around what that actually looks like. But it's one of the largest rates per square metre costs that a business will face, or that a commercial property owner will face, and then conversely, as it's passed on to the occupiers of that building. I think when you look at the development of other cities, Christchurch is a very unique example, obviously for obvious reasons. Looking at Hamilton, obviously there's been a lot of spread of Hamilton up into the base and into a number of those different areas. So obviously that increases, I guess that spreads the number of properties that are rated, not necessarily, obviously the operating budget of the council won't necessarily increase in a proportional manner. So that allows those rates to be, I guess, continue to be more spread across those businesses. We're a little bit more confined and geographically constrained in Wellington. We don't have a lot of developable land in Wellington, which means that without vertical kind of development of commercial properties, particularly for the CBD, we don't really increase the pool that we can spread those rates to. While we've still got that kind of increase in overall costs just through CPI and the cost of goods and services that are going to keep having that impost on council rates alongside any projects that need to be undertaken by the council as well. So we've got a couple of different challenges that we've got to face, one of which is definitely sort of our geographical constraints in Wellington as well.
And if I can also just add to that question, we are working really closely with the Wellington City Council rates team, where we do have examples of properties in Auckland and in Wellington owned by the same member of ours, and it does show that Wellington pays a significant amount, 3-point-something times what the Auckland property would pay for a comparable size and CV rating. And so we're working really closely with the Wellington City rates team on these types of issues, obviously with the rates review going on in the background. And just wanted to say thank you to the rates team who are reaching out to us and having these conversations, because our members are really passionate about the future of Wellington, and we do want to see, you know, thriving cities and fairer outcomes to all. So thank you.
Thank you, Jared and Catherine. I just want to assure you that comparator case has been shared with councillors, so we've been having those conversations too. So that information you're kindly sharing is getting through to us, and we look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thanks both.
Thank you.
We now move on to our next submitter, Matt Wells from Cricket Wellington. Welcome. Kia ora, Matt. Whichever you're more comfortable, whichever. Sit down, and as long as you've got your mic on, get the little green light, and you have 10 minutes.
Looks like we're good to go.
Thank you.
Kia ora. First and foremost, thank you very much for the opportunity to come and present to the Wellington City Council. Appreciate you've no doubt had a pretty full-on day, so I promise to keep well within the time limit. Cricket Wellington, as some of you will be aware, is responsible for the administration, promotion and development of cricket across the Wellington region, and we're committed to working to create outstanding cricketing experiences for our community. Locally, it's been a fantastic season for our flagship teams, the Wellington Blaze, under-17 girls, under-19 girls and men's, who've won their respective national tournaments. We've also, as some of you will be aware, have got some superstars representing Wellington on the global stage: Sophie Devine, Amelia Kerr, Devon Conway, some really big names. To maximise the opportunities created by these successes, Cricket Wellington and our clubs continue to prioritise community cricket, which is evident in our strategic plan, which is focusing on youth and female cricket, while continuing to focus on umpires, facilities, umpire development, coach capability, etc., etc. Last year, a couple of highlights included us getting in to see 15,000 children, tamariki and rangatahi, across Wellington and introducing them to the game we love. We had over 300 coaches involved in some form of formal education. That's mums, dads, aunties and uncles. A highlight for us was our multicultural backyard cricket festival, which we ran at the Basin Reserve at the end of the season. That was 15 diverse communities, many whom have had no exposure to cricket. We got them all together and really put on a cracking day, which we're really proud of. And of course, our bread and butter is our weekly competition offerings. So we've got over 450 teams with participants ranging from 5 all the way through to 80, which is pretty impressive. To ensure our membership is heard, we recently engaged with them to understand what was important to our membership. And one of those strategic priorities identified by them was our facilities. That's both on and off the field. Alongside that, we do an annual Voice of Participant survey with both New Zealand Cricket and Nielsen. And some of those findings, again, off-field facilities and on-field facilities were the second and third highest priorities in terms of improving that experience for our participant. Before I move into the long-term plan itself, I would like to acknowledge our partnership with the Wellington City Council, in particular Lauren Joyce and Sanjay Patel, who we meet with quarterly to discuss facilities and what we can do to improve them. On a more day-to-day regular basis, Sarah Sullivan, Sarah Campbell, who are our booking experts who do what they can to keep cricket thriving, so we appreciate that, and Kieran Graham, who's on the ground dealing with operational matters. So I just think it's important to acknowledge the efforts they put on for our community. What we know. As we know, evidence indicates that high-quality facilities do contribute to positive participation outcomes, and ultimately that does result in healthier societies. As again, you'll all be aware, healthier communities and societies is a stated outcome for Wellington City Council, with 8,000 participants registered and 15,000, again, youth, rangatahi and tamariki. We do play a fundamental role to the well-being of Wellingtonians across the region. Facilities in the Wellington City Council region are under considerable strain. We do have a shortage of grass and artificial wickets, and we've got some evidence which we've shared with the team. We will continue to work through that. In addition to these shortages, there are concerns around some of the ongoing maintenance of fields, grass wickets, artificial wickets. And again, as many of you will know, challenge with the off-field facilities, we don't exactly have a full fleet of gender-neutral facilities. We do have some antiquated facilities that are making it challenging for everyone across our community to engage. So what we're seeking from the Wellington City Council in terms of this submission, continue to partner with Cricket Wellington to increase the quantity and quality of facilities. Partner with Cricket Wellington to establish minimum standards of maintenance and upkeep, artificial asset registers, cycles for refurbishment and the like, including a mechanism to provide in-season feedback. Continue to allow us to work with you around identifying and upgrading facilities. We know Granada North and Galloway, the like, are on the horizon, so we just want to be really clear that we want to be a part of those conversations. And of course, we do understand that there is some stuff we as cricket need to do because there is a strain and there is underutilisation during some off-peak times, and again, we acknowledge that. To alleviate these pressures, we're trying to play more cricket midweek and on Sundays, trying to be flexible, and of course we're partnering with other codes and colleges to try and ground share and partner with them. In terms of our investment, we do continue to invest significantly in ground fees and maintenance. It's just under 200,000 across the wider Wellington region, with just under 100,000 for Wellington City alone. So that's a considerable investment for a relatively small sporting organisation. And just in summary, look, sport plays a fundamental role in keeping our communities active and engaged, and we really do genuinely believe that, and I understand that a lot of you as councillors do too. And we just look forward to continuing to work with and partner with the Wellington City Council to continue to give our communities an opportunity to play the game in a safe and enjoyable environment. And yeah, more than happy to take on any questions that anyone may have.
Councillor Abdurrahman.
Cool. Thank you so much for your submission. And my question would be, you know how you said how much you guys spending on in the field now, and that means some part of your source of income is the family that you're charging. For a child, example, how much you charge for registration or per term?
It depends on club to club and age to age, to be honest. So our clubs charge those costs on, but it can be anywhere from $50 to $100. So, if they're younger and not playing as much cricket, i.e. they're on the ground for 2 hours, the fee might be less, but yeah, it's generally in that vicinity of 50 to 100.
So my question would be is, for the affordable sport that we will be doing a review, what that means for those communities members that you're charging them, some of them $50, some of them $100, how much of that percentage is going to the ground lease, and what that means when you request the review, what it looks like, the review bringing to the community for you?
So I guess the easiest way to example I can provide is from our perspective, we don't make any money on competitions. So we're bringing in approximately $240,000 a year in team entry fees. $200,000 is going out to pay for ground fees. So there could be an argument made that the majority of costs are going towards ground fees for our participants.
So you pay that one directly to the council?
200 across all, so it's 94,000 to Wellington City.
Okay.
Yeah. Councillor Brown.
I've got two questions. The first is, what would you like to happen? Do you want the fees to go down, or do you want our spending to go up?
I think it's twofold. I think that what we're really seeking in terms of the affordable sports is greater transparency, because right now we are not sure where our fees are going and what services. So that is what the review is seeking from our perspective. We want to understand A is going in and A is going towards B, etc., etc. That's the first step in this.
But let's assume we have transparency. So are people complaining about what they're paying, or are they just saying we're not getting value for money because we'd like better facilities?
It's a combination of both, to be completely frank. I mean, the evidence tells us that the second and third greatest priorities for our community to make a better experience is improved facilities, and equally are hearing that the cost of playing sport is too high. So it's twofold. It's both in my mind.
The other question I've got is that, within the overall ambit of spending on sport, I don't know what the exact figure is for council, but clearly we are under quite a lot of budgetary pressure. So where would you like us to take the money from? Let's assume that we were willing to spend more on cricket facilities. Have you got any ideas by the way, I do have some myself. So I'm not going to tell you. But but what would do you feel like there are some free riders out there? And the word riders, by the way, is a hint. That who are getting a lot of benefits from the city who aren't paying for it.
I don't think that's my place to comment. There's obviously been some commentary in the media from various people that are involved with sport or have been in the past. It's not for me to comment on where that money should come from or where it should go. I'm just advocating for cricket here and sport. So yeah.
Councillor Abdulrahman, you get one more very quick one.
You mentioned about partnering with local schools, and I think that is a good idea. Sometimes they do have swimming pools where we can share as a community. So can you a bit elaborate on that?
It's a challenging one, but an example might be somewhere like St Patstown, who we do work with to use their facilities. We partner with college sport, but what would be amazing would be, and it's a real tough one, but how do we open up their grounds on Sundays so we can potentially use that, and vice versa, because there's different demand at different times. So anything that can be done to help facilitate those discussions and relationships, I guess.
I'd like to thank you very much, Matt. That's been very useful. and we put you to the test as well, right?
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we'll go straight to our next submitter who's online, Andrew Leslie from the Kōrau. Kia ora, Andrew. And you have 10 minutes, including time for questions. I'll hand it over to you.
Brilliant. Can you hear me okay? Awesome. Well, e te mana whenua o te rāra Māori o te rohi nei e mihi ana. E nā rangatira kua mihi mai nei ki a au tēnei rā tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Andrew Leslie tuku ingoa, and I'm the Chief Executive of Nuku Ora. So thanks for having me, and just also want to acknowledge the previous speaker, Matt, for the awesome mahi that they do, and coming up after me, Cleve from Big Street Bikers, likewise, for great work that they're doing. I wanted to start off just by introducing ourselves. Some of you may not know us. Nuku Ora is formerly known as Sport Wellington. So we're an independent charitable trust, one of 14 around the country. So our primary role is to provide leadership and support to the physical activity system. And by that, I mean a whole bunch of different sorts of organisations providing a whole range of different physical activity opportunities, and that includes councils. Our region goes up as far as Ekatahuna and across to Otaki, so there's 8 councils in that region. And want to acknowledge the very positive and constructive relationship we've had with Wellington City Council over many years. So we work on sort of 3 different levels, really, with 3 different audiences. Firstly, at the grassroots, the community level, and working with community organisations to understand the needs of communities and the barriers that they encounter to physical activity. We work through the providers of physical activity, helping them understand the needs of community. And then we work at a system level as well, and providing leadership and coordination regionally. We've got a broad view of what physical activity means. So that encompasses play, active recreation, sport, and active transport. And we go about our work with a really strong focus on equity, which sees us working more and more closely into communities that experience more barriers to participation. And we work in partnership with our mana whenua partners, Ngāti Toa and Te Atiawa. Next, I just wanted to share some sort of general views really around physical activity and some of the some thoughts and insights that we have before I'll touch specifically on the annual plan. So, as we see with councils, you've got a really good understanding of the benefits of physical activity. But through our work, we see that there is quite a wide range of barriers to people participating and being physically active. And this includes obviously the cost to participate, but also it's about facilities and opportunities, and ensuring that sort of access to these meets people's needs and interests as well. And quite frankly, it's not going to get any easier. So obviously, cost of living is going to be increasingly affecting those barriers to participation. The effects of climate change in terms of the provision of spaces and places and the ability to actually hold physical activity opportunities. And also looking at population growth, and within that, the increasing diversity of the population, and therefore the increasing diversity of needs and interests within that. So totally acknowledge that there's a lot for you to think about when it comes to planning and decision making, not only in this annual plan, but in the upcoming LTP as well. And I just want to express that Nuku Audit is here to help. And we're doing this through our mahi. Just a couple of things to keep an eye out for will be the work we're doing around sports fields and indoor court strategies, which are nearly finalised and will be ready to feed into your long-term planning coming up. And so, finally to the annual plan itself. So when we're looking at this, we wanted to focus our support on facility projects that we feel will cater for a diverse range of interests, and projects that make it easier for communities to access. And so this includes things like cost and transport links, physical access, and the type of activities on offer. So there are 3 projects in particular that we are putting our support in behind. They are the Kilburnie Park and Rec Centre project. So we really like the fact that the reconfiguring of the toilets in the Rec Centre to gender neutral will improve the inclusiveness of the facility. We also really like what's happening in terms of the whole precinct there, and the concept development and design of the destination skate park, which will cater for a really growing popularity in skateboarding, particularly amongst girls. Secondly, the Granada North Park upgrade. So we see this as being addressing issues that we've identified through the sports field strategy that I mentioned earlier, in terms of access to quality fields. As Matt mentioned before, there are several codes that express a real support to this project, and have been interested in being part of the consultation process. And we like the idea of universal design and active design principles that can be brought to this project as well. And finally, the bike network plan, in terms of the asset will be enable sort of a wide range of different physical activity to take place, and how physical activity is integrated into people's daily lives. So that's sort of the upshot of our submission. And again, just wanted to reiterate the great relationship we have with Wellington City Council, and that we're here to help when it comes to ongoing planning. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you, Andrew. We should have time for a couple of questions. The first one is from Councillor Pannett.
Thanks, Andrew. Great work. Can I just ask you about your thinking about how to get kids to sport without using lots of petrol-consuming cars? Thank you.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm guilty of that myself, actually, travelling back and forth across the city on a Saturday and Sunday. Obviously thinking about facility design and transport links, active transport, how the bike network links up with facilities. I think I really encourage you to be future focused and evidence based when it comes to planning around facilities, and thinking about those links with active transport is really important.
We have another question from Councillor Abdurrahman.
Kia ora, Andrew. I'm looking forward to catch up with you at some stage to discuss some of the points that you know. But for now, few questions. I'm going to put them together for you to answer all. One, removing cost barrier. What exactly we talking about here? Example, if you see there is a registration fee, I can give example. If you register for a football, the registration fee $160, and you need to buy boots $140, and socks and like $400, $500 for one child. So are we talking only portion of it where the kid's paying for registration, or what kind of cost barrier are we talking about? If you're talking in general, how are you thinking to address it? The second question is population grows and the change in demography, especially the ethnic community. Is it only cost barrier, or is also that some kind of social and cultural things that are involved in that space? And what is your suggestions? As an example is when it comes to swimming, I do know how, Wellington City Council is accommodating some of our communities and what kind of time they wanted, how they wanted. So can you please touch on that one and those two questions? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So that the cost to participate one is very complex. There, as you said, there's a number of elements to that. So it's about, understanding it at quite a detailed level where the tension points are there. There's no silver bullet. So the whole conversation going on around fees and charges, for example, that's just one element to it. It's about how to reducing the transport costs is about sort of where facilities are actually placed. So there's a number of different elements to this. I think it's about sort of being well informed in your decision making around how the decisions that council make can help to mitigate some of that cost to participate. The second one around the increasing diversity of the population as it grows. It's very much about understanding the different needs and interests of different cultures and age groups as we diversify. And there is a lot of good evidence insights been built up through Sport New Zealand, which is available through to a regional sports trust like ourselves, and through to sort of the regional sporting organisations as well, and looking at what examples are happening elsewhere in the country, and there's some really good practice happening around.
Sorry, we've run out of time, but I just want to thank you so much for taking the time, Andrew. Thank you for making your submission.
All right, kia ora.
Kia ora. And now we move to Cleve, I believe, is online too. Cleve Cameron from Big Street Bikers. Kia ora. And you have 10 minutes, including any time for questions. I'll throw it over to you now, Cleve.
Kia ora. Kia ora, Mayor and councillors. Thanks so much for finding the time to come and tell our story today. Acknowledge first and foremost, it's been a really difficult day in Wellington, and so really feeling it for you guys there on that, and realise it's probably been quite a long day. I will sort of whistle through what we're doing, our work that we're doing in Wellington at the moment, and I'd love to hear some sort of any questions or discuss anything from there. But firstly, I suppose congratulations on the commitment and investment that's going into cycleway infrastructure in Wellington. I think it really lead the way across the country, so it's really exciting and we're thrilled to be part of it. Do I need to do a click to move to the next screen?
Oh, you just say, and we'll flick through the slides as you command us, Cleve.
Oh, great! I'll just go beep. Beep, please. So we've been working closely with the team in council, so the urban design and transport team, on a plan for a partnership to expand our Lockdock network across Poneke. So I'll take you through this more and how we'd really like to sort of deliver it as fast as we can, actually, because we can see some really great benefits to the city. Beep, please. So we started, our first Locky Dock network was in Christchurch, and I think this location here is a good example of kind of the nature of what the Locky Docks are doing. It's bringing people out on bikes more often. It's all about secure parking and charging for bikes and e-bikes. We've done a whole lot of fantastic research, so we know it really gets more bikes on the streets. It's app activated, and you can even use your Snapper card to do it. We have a special model that enables it to be effectively free for the council and at no cost to the users. Next slide, please. So that is because through our partnership that we have with Mercury and with Wakatahi, we're able to deliver this across the country, and also to deliver it. So our vision for a happy, healthy, carbon-free streets. We're on a current rollout program of 100 Locky Docks into key centres. We'll pop on to the next one. Thanks. As I was saying, there's some great data when people are using the Locky Dock stations. You may be familiar with the one on Dixon Street. It's been really successful. It's full most days, actually. We get a little message on our console here at HQ that goes, this dock is full. But what we see on this graph here is the return user rate of people parking their bikes. So every time a bike is parked in a dock, we know that was a car trip that wasn't taken. And we know, when, how long therefore, how often people are coming back again. But the important thing about this graph is you're seeing a really sticky user behaviour. So you're seeing this return rate, which is really high. You can also see when COVID hit and the dips there over the last couple of years as well. So yeah, it's a really good indication of good behaviour. We have just recently, so here we go, breaking news. So just last week, this Locky Dock was installed at Wellington Airports, right at the gates just as you leave, the toll gate there. You can see there's no bikes parked in there because this was a photograph was taken by Rob, who installed it. So it's ready to go. So we're looking forward to doing a little opening ceremony on this one soon. Would welcome council presence there, and we can do a special Locky docking for that. So yeah, we're thrilled about being there. Next one, please. So essentially, yeah, so what I want to take you through is that, yeah, we know that putting Locky Docks in actually gets more bums on bikes. We've created a model that comes with no cost to ratepayers, and we really like to just ramp it up and roll it out. If we pop onto the next slide, thanks. So just put on this page here really quickly, sort of the model effectively. So we're looking at 12 Locky Docks in Central City. Overall, that's like in terms of a capex, is about 1.2 million. And that as I was saying, we're able to cover those costs through the model that we have, and also the operational costs. So that's in terms of the customer support, maintenance, insurance, and all that sort of stuff. It's provided as a free public amenity because of the partners, but also with the third-party advertising media that's on there. We have some really strong guidelines around that. We say there'll be no fossil fuel advertising, and we work with the council to develop those guidelines as well, and encourage a lot of local communications. We also bring onto those digital screens wayfinding, so maps that we co-design with the team and show where the new cycleways are going. Long term, there's potentially a revenue option there as well. So it works out, and obviously a media channel for council communications. The bit that we get really excited about is in terms of the impact, that we know that a network of 12 Locky Docks there will really have an effect on reducing VKT, as we say, because we've got the data there to support it. And then also deliver a really, really healthy net social benefit, which includes physical health and mental health benefits for the locals. If we pop on to the next one, thanks. So our dream is to really crack into it. We think we've got the stock at hand. We could deliver another 12 stations potentially in the central city. This is sort of the plan we're working on at the moment, and ready to go. So, and then probably do the same again next year, sort of expanding out to the suburban centres. Sorry, we beep for the next slide, please. there we go, 2024, see, another 12. So we'll get on a roll. And maybe the next slide after this, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to recap in terms of the unique focus of the content that we have on the screen. And so it does have third-party advertising, but we've got some really clear guidelines around what we want and don't want on there. But we see this as a really important channel in leading the positive behaviour change for mode shift, showcasing the new cycleways, also the quiet streets as well. Generally doing a lot of storytelling work and setting up a new urban mobility lifestyle. On to the next one, please. So yeah, as I was saying, there's a key aspect here. Yes, again, so we call it wayfinding, I guess, so maps showing where the cycleways are and quiet streets, but it does a bigger job than that. Actually, is really about prompting people to consider to ride. We change the headlines out on here. So like, for example, 5 minutes to town from here, or 5 minutes to Evans Bay by bike. So really encouraging people to consider active modes instead of, driving. So yeah, this is a key part of it. The next one, please. And as we sort of look to locations where we're servicing, it's all about servicing convenience and the right location. So transport hubs, the supermarkets, libraries, community centres and so on. So this is where it becomes it's a really interesting combination between, we have agreements with the Warehouse Group and Countdown, for example. So we're able to put into supermarkets. We're also working with a number of other learning institutions and so on. So it's connecting all these private, public destinations to provide convenience, so more people want to ride more often. The next one, please. So just, I suppose, a quick précis snapshot of, there's currently 4 Locky Docks in town. That's including the sparkling new one at the airport, which I'll be using soon. And but looking at a real density, serving a lot of the bikes that we're seeing, down around the Golden Mile, a lot of awesome uptake in biking happening around town. Next slide, please. So sort of wrapping up, really, we see Locky Docks really are complementing the investment that's been done into the bike network plan and Paneki Puneki to really, drive those goals in terms of reducing emissions, congestion, and improving wellbeing. So love to take some questions. Actually, no, there's one more slide. Actually, sorry. As I've already mentioned, so we're working on a network design with the team. There's been some great letters of support from businesses and groups and also Wellington NZ. The next things for us is really confirming the network design. We develop a partnership agreement then as well and for the public realm, and then start installing. So I guess today really is just sort of garnering support from the council for this. And that's me. I'd love to take some questions.
Thanks, Cleve. Lots of people want to ask questions, but I don't think we've got time for many, but I'll go to one at least from the Deputy Mayor.
Oh, kia ora.
Kia ora, Cleve. Thank you for your presentation. 2 really quick questions. How are other cities in New Zealand taking up or increasing Locky Docks? And what have been the barriers to getting them into Wellington? Because I think we've been a bit slow on this one. Thank you.
Thanks, Laurie. Yes, great question. So right now we have a network design underway with Hutt City. So working closely with them, looking at there's 10 to 20 sites there. We've just installed one outside Kapiti Council office in Paraparumu. We also, other cities across the country working through network designs as well. So Whakatane, we've just installed a network there of 5 stations on the public realm. We're going through a similar process, but I can't wait to have some in Wellington. And to answer your other question, so the barrier, main barrier in the past, I think, has been probably around just just the media component of it, but we've got a solution for that now. That has been advised to the staff. So that is all go. We've got an agreement with council's media operator, and so there's nothing standing in the way in that respect.
Good news. Thank you. Thanks so much, Cleve. We would have way more questions, but we are out of time. So thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk with us today.
Oh, pleasure. Sorry, I didn't speak faster.
You spoke quite fast. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
I'd now like to welcome Warwick Taylor and Graham Clark for the Wellington Residents Coalition. You have 10 minutes, including time for questions. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. I'm Warwick Taylor and this is Graham Clark. I will concentrate on rates and Graham will concentrate on water. Go back 35 years, you'll find that residents paid 30% of the general rate and the commercial property owners paid 70%. On top of that, residents now pay uniform annual charges and user charges for things like rubbish. So the residents have had a bit of a raw deal over the last 35 years because of basically neoliberal reforms. And that has been accompanied by sales of assets which produced income for the council. But this was covered up. The council perhaps minimised the residential's rates increase by perhaps neglecting some things which we know about, and by also using proceeds of asset sales to retire debt. And now, issues that have been coming for years, have been building up for years, are coming to the fore. Plus things we didn't anticipate. Things like it rains a lot and there's erosion. We need to protect our roads, which are our lifelines for people, better by building more retaining walls, etc. Plus the threats of climate change to flooding, to sea level rise, to name but a few. We over the years have pointed out how this city is divided between those who have and have not. And now the rate increases that we face are now dividing the residents between those who pay their rates directly by virtue of the fact that they own some residential property, and those who pay their rates to their landlords via the landlord. We do understand the problems faced by people on low incomes, particularly the elderly, in paying their rates. And we fully support increasing the rates rebate. Property owning elderly are not the only people who have problems. It's also renting elderly. It's a growing problem, the renting elderly, but there are other people on benefits who also pay rates via their landlords. So we want the council to at least investigate the idea of providing a rebate to tenants as well who are on low incomes. And this could be financed by landlords who charge excessively, paying a higher rate. I'll now pass over to Graham to talk about water.
one example, and that is water pressure. If a house has a water pressure reducing valve and has high water pressure, that water pressure reducing valve will reduce its consumption by up to a third. Wellington's very hilly. Water pressure at the bottom of the hill is a lot higher than it is at the top of the hill. I know on my own house we had a water pressure of 7 bar, which is only a fraction under the maximum permitted water pressure that Wellington Water is meant to operate by. Wellington Water has told me they're under no compulsion to lower water pressure, only do they have to have a reasonable water pressure at a new house. High water pressure is a factor involved in the leaks. Wellington City Council has a website that recommends water-saving things, but it's no mention in that of water pressure reducing valves, which could make a huge difference to the amount of water that Wellington uses. Every drop of water saved, if it reduces our consumption, means that you wind up paying less in the Wellington Water levy. More savings leads to more things that you can do in order to conserve water.
All right, I have some questions. The first one being from Pauiwi Kelly.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking the time to come and make a submission and also to sit and listen to some of the earlier submissions. Thank you for the interesting solutions you've proposed as well. But the question that I have for you, and I know because you were sitting there when the, what's his name? The Property Council made their submission. What would you say to them based on what you heard them say and what you're saying?
Look, what the Property Council had to say was that we're in a competition with Auckland, and if Auckland lowers its rates for the commercial sector, well, we've just got to lower our rates as well. That's part of the neoliberal race to the bottom, and there's no future in this city for that kind of approach. If we're going to compete with Auckland, let's do it with the excellence and the thinking outside the box. In Auckland, they already have rates charges for water, and they have a huge population compared to Wellington. If we start thinking more laterally about how we spend and where we spend, we're likely to do far better with the rates that we charge, rather than throwing money into schemes that are promoted by bureaucrats who only have a one-track mind.
So just quickly, one more question or follow-on question. Do you think that businesses paying 70% of the rates and residents paying 30% is fair and equitable?
Yes.
Thank you. No, you don't have to explain.
I'll explain why. Value, as some of you will know, all value is created by human labour. Much of that human labour are Wellington City residents. The money that pays for that value through come from customers, most of whom are Wellington residents. So that's how we can justify it.
Pauiwi Hohaya.
Kia ora, thank you. I was interested in your comment around a possible solution for, charging a higher rate for landlords who, a higher rates take for landlords who charge excessively. Can you tell me a bit about how that might work? I'm intrigued.
We get each landlord to register. It'd be a good idea to have landlords register, and then you could actually enforce the healthy homes. That would be one thing. But more important, in terms of rating, you could, when they register, they'll put down what their rent is, and you could work out a fair proportion of value, property value, that rent should be. And if it's excessive, this is all in principle, you can investigate this, then you can work out, well, maybe we'll charge them at for every excessive dollar, we'll charge us an excessive rate of whatever that will be.
I have some experience in both sectors, a daughter who is a renter, and also some experience in the commercial side. And per square metre of housing, the rate that's paid by the residential tenant is greater than a normal commercial rate. So the landlord is paying for an $800,000 value home equivalent less 7,000 rates a year than is being paid by the commercial landlord, and yet the residential landlord is charging more.
Thank you both. We're out of time, but thanks for taking the time to give your submission. We appreciate it. Now we will move forward to Maggie Bayfield from the Ōtari Wilton Bush Trust. Kia ora. Oh, two of you, sorry, hello. And you have 10 minutes, including time for questions. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. And this is Tim Mason. I'm the Secretary for the Trust and Tim is the Treasurer. I'm sure you're all aware of Ōtari Wilton's Bush as the Wellington City Council is responsible for its governance and management. It's a significant bush reserve and 6-star rated garden of international significance. It's a real jewel in the crown. Unlike Zealandia, Wellingtonians have free 24/7 access to the reserve, and it's highly valued for supporting both mental and physical well-being. And just to note, you can actually get there on the number 14 bus, you don't have to drive. Ōtari Wilton's Bush Trust is a public charitable trust, and our purpose is to educate and raise awareness and appreciation of native plants and promote the unique biodiversity of Ōtari Wilton's Bush. Quite a narrow purpose. And we support the Council in its management and development of the reserve. Trust volunteers contribute to Ōtari in many different ways. Regular roles and contributions include weeding, pest control, revegetation, plant propagation, hosting visitors in tāne whakapiripiri during the weekends, learning opportunities for the public, including seminars, guided walks, and general advocacy. We provide feedback, advice, and assistance to the Council on a wide range of issues. Highlights in the year have included the Council's completion of the upgrade of the Visitor Centre tāne whakapiripiri. It's now a pleasant place for visitors and the Trust's hosts. The Trust believes, however, that there could be more information provided in this space about the gardens, the history and ecological values, and as well as, of course, the inevitable better public toilets. But we'd appreciate the opportunity to work with Council on this. We're also very pleased with the enhanced space for the Trust Nursery, working alongside the garden staff to facilitate and advance Ōtari's growing leadership role in plant conservation, especially in its work with partner organisations to re-establish populations of threatened native plants in the wild. We'll be reinstating the popular plant sales at the Open Day this year. In advance of the centenary in 2026, the Trust published a history of Ōtari, written by B. Dawson, with assistance from Lotteries, Environment and Heritage, Nicole Foundation, the Council itself, and the Royal New Zealand Institute of Horticulture. It's been really well received, and there are still a few copies available if you want one. Looking ahead, the Trust's not asking the Council for new capital expenditure, you'll be probably pleased to know. We realise a difficult financial situation this year, although it is likely that public toilets will need to be upgraded in the near future. But we're keen to see at least the current quality of maintenance of the facilities, the gardens and the forested area upheld. It's imperative that gains in weed and pest control and general management of the gardens and the development, both bush and facilities, are retained. Visitors value the free access to Ōtari's gardens and diverse bushwalks, where dogs on leashes are welcome, but mountain bikes are not allowed. Trust members appreciate and are adamant that the policy of dogs on leads and no bikes, and therefore no bike trails, within the significant area, despite any pressure to the contrary, be upheld. We'll work to maintain our great working relationship with the City Council staff who manage the gardens. We acknowledge their skill and commitment, and we look forward to contributing to provide feedback, assistance and advice where appropriate. We'd also welcome to take any of you on a guided tour of the gardens. Thank you, and open for questions.
Thank you, Maggie. And we all had a wonderful visit at the end of last year on a gorgeous day, and yeah, it was really enjoyable. We have a question from Councillor. Some councillors got lost, but we found them again, unfortunately. No, sorry. Councillor Calvert has a question.
Yeah, look, I'm just interested about the budget, obviously. Are you aware of, because we haven't got down to that level of detail as councillors in terms of the budget for the maintenance of this area, have you got any insight? Is the budget remaining the same, or is inflationary increases added to it? Are you aware of?
Much the same, to the best of my knowledge.
So pretty much the same as last year? And there's no budget there to improve any facilities with
Provision in the longer term plan for capital expenditure.
right. Okay. Okay.
In the 5 and 10 year.
Okay. But are you looking for some more money now? Really? No. You're all okay.
We're wanting an awareness.
Okay.
At present.
Yeah, and at least maintaining the standard that we have at present.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And no bike tracks.
That's all. Oh, Councillor Paul.
Hey, kia ora, Maggie. Thanks for your submission this morning. I actually went to the weaving wānanga over the weekend. It was so good. And I wondered maybe could you talk about some of the other like recreational stuff that you guys are providing out of Ōtari for the community?
Really, we provide just tours, groups. I think we've got the Japanese ambassador there for a tea, and we have lots of school groups and community groups using the troop lawn facilities throughout. But I think the key thing is that it is free and easy access for either some of the more challenging trails or the nice gentle trails around the Kaiwharawhara, or in fact up around the gardens. So nothing apart from the weaving, and we have things at Matariki and various other special times and the open day, but that's about it.
Business as usual.
Business as usual, yeah.
That slip that you've got on your, how's that going and what's the cost looking like to sort that all out?
That's really a council responsibility, and apart from being there and helping with the clean-up of the rubbish that was exposed, and we'll be there helping with the planting, it's really the council that are leading that charge.
Okay, we've run out of questions. Thank you so much. Lovely to see you.
Kia
And I think we'll do one more and then we'll take a little break. So I would like to welcome Jane and Erin from Newtown Community Centre. No mai. Haere mai. And you have 10 minutes. We'll reset our clock. You'll have 10 minutes, including time for questions. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou. I'm Jane Patterson. I'm a member of the Trust Board of the Community Centre, and Erin Gribble is the powerhouse, the kai whakahaere at the Community Centre, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. And again, like Ōtari, we will give you comfort that we're not here to ask for more dosh at this stage, but to give you an understanding of our situation and why we don't feel that it is sustainable. You may well know that the refurbished community centre opened yesterday, and it's fabulous. It's just really beautiful. It's aesthetically and functionally a joy. But we're still, of course, having to sort out a number of details to get it functioning well. The building is owned by the council, and the community centre is run by a trust. We have 4 facilities. We have the community centre building, we have Newtown Hall, we have Smart Newtown, and the Tool Library. We have asked for additional funding in the past, but have continued to receive the same amount plus cost of living increases. We are facing increased costs. You will all be aware of how things have changed in the last while in terms of increased pressure on budgets. Plus we found, and COVID had an impact that we shouldn't underestimate, and what we found was that having 2 principal staff running the centre was insufficient to get the jobs done and to maintain good health and safety. So the Trust agreed to go into reserves to fund an additional staff position, which has been a lifesaver. We're also facing staff pay increases when the living wage rate is due to increase. The Community Centre Board has been criticised in the past for having too much money in reserves, but the reason for this was that we've been building our reserves in order to be able to fit out the theatre after the building was upgraded. 150,000 has been contributed from our reserves to this upgrade, but in addition, our staff worked brilliantly to apply for lotteries funding and were granted more than 232,000, which was the full amount that was requested, which I thought was just a stellar effort. So this has enabled the fit out of a fantastic theatre space, which is a significant resource now, not only for Newtown, but for Wellington. There aren't many theatres of that size, and it's recognised as a really, magnificent new addition to the scene. While Wellington City Council has spent a truckload of money on the building upgrade, the Trust has enhanced this council asset significantly with the additional investment in the theatre. The community centre is different from other Wellington City Council owned and run community centres. It has 7 hireable spaces across 3 of the buildings, 2 subtenants, and these provide some funding, but actually I was very interested to actually look into it quite closely and find that it's a very small part of our budget, and it also takes significant time and administration. We also have several other staff who need to be managed. The Kai Whakahei area also has budget management responsibility with the support of a bookkeeper. We are also responsible for developing our own health and safety and other policies and procedures, and we don't have the benefit of reliever staff, and we're on call more of the time. So this is by way of giving you a brief overview, and we're very happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I do have a few, the first being from Councillor Abdurrahman.
Cool. First of all, congratulations on the opening of the community space. Such a great place, and for anyone who haven't been there, I encourage you to go and see. This is located in one of the best suburbs in the country. It's Newtown. And well, I think going back to today's as well, it's really great to see how you invited and welcome the community who've been impacted by the really disaster that happened last night, and good on you for that. So how much do you think confident, even though the inside looks good, I think still we need a bit of work in that, the outside, and what is happening in that regard? Are you coming back into, to ask us some stage, or because we deserve, and the Newtown community deserve, a good community centre that's beautiful outside and out as well?
Yeah, so the outside of the centre is out of the project scope of the inside, but I guess it would be something that operations staff will probably bring to Yarl, is that that investment should be protected by the outside being remedied. Yeah, there's a lot of issues with the guttering and the the health and safety of some of the cobblestones outside and things. So that is worth mentioning. That will probably come up in the future. Yeah.
My follow-up question would be, this is a community that's very diverse, and the need is bigger than any other community as well. I think anyone who's been to that community understands the importance of community centres, how we need to put more resources, and I think based on the demand. And do you think we are supporting you enough, or,
Yeah, we're simply not keeping up with the demand. So having the support from our board for some admin support has been vital, because, we could be doing so much more, but just answering the phones and the emails is really more than a full-time role. And outside of doing venue management, we're really keen on community building and community development, and our staff are professionals in that area. So we would like to be able to do more of that, and we even could be hiring the space even right up to the capacity if our staff had the capacity to be able to do that. But simply put, the job descriptions are
too large for the amount of hours that there really are. And as Jane explained, having that huge spread of multiple venues, multiple sub-organisations, we are quite unique in that way, and that's just, we're spread it a little bit thin. But we're still doing a great job.
This is the last one, I think. I want
No.
Poe Kelly. He's a good advocate for you. Thank you for coming in. I just wanted you to confirm for me that you're not asking for any more funds, but what you are flagging to us is that you've been prudent and you've set aside funds that's already earmarked, and please don't take any more away.
Well, it's not so much taking any more away, but we have had to eat into reserves, and that will continue because we'll be putting in money into the internal fit out to make sure that it meets our needs over and above what the, project has been responsible for.
I did see that, you asked for 330 and you got 217, and there was a comment that you had reserves. So that's all I'm asking for confirmation is that, the money that you asked for is needed and is being used, and not to undermine that.
And we're not asking for it now, we're just sending the message that we can't keep digging.
Hey, so just keep up the good work, and now you've made me want to come and have a look and see what you're doing.
Very, very welcome. But just to touch on that, we will need to be sort of applying for other funding, which is quite challenging because of the relationship that we have with Wellington City Council. We're not very desirable to other funders. So for core operational funding, we're not asking for more money right now, but we are going to need. And we have asked for more money, but we are going to need to because, just for that core operational funding, we won't have any reserves very soon. Yeah.
Okay, one last quick one, Deputy Mayor Foon.
Kia ora. Just with the new centre, do you have a sense check on if business or desire for the venues and time at the community centre will grow on top of what you were doing before COVID?
Many people want to book the centre. There's huge level of demand, and for us it's about balancing and making sure that the yoga class can happen, the theatre production can happen, the community meeting can happen. There's a huge amount of different users that want to use our space, and once again it'll be fully stacked every night and every day.
Thank you so much. We're out of time. Thanks, Jane and Erin. We really appreciate you coming in.
Kia ora. Thank you.
Kia ora. All right, councillors, we're going to and public participants who are waiting, we're going to take a short break, 10 minutes, and then we will reconvene for our final session. Thank you. Councillor Chung? We'll get going again and welcome Steve West. You've got your choice of the podium or the table, whatever. Yeah, great. And just make sure your green light's on, and you have 5 minutes, including any time for questions.
Thank you. Well, tēnā koutou. For those who are new, my name is Steve West. I'll be discussing the SNA provisions. But first, I want to say that council spending is out of control, with aspirations beyond its revenue. Instead of getting real about what can be afforded, residents have been asked to fund an outrageous 12.3% rates increase in the face of a cost of living crisis. For context, with the proposed increase, our rates will be $160 per week, despite living in a street that the council doesn't even maintain because it's a private way. Now, to focus on SNAs, I'd like to start by acknowledging how programs such as Zealandia, Predator Free, Capital Kiwi, and other voluntary conservation activities, including by many local residents, have seen an explosion of birds across Paniki with pests in decline. As an example, flocks of kaka are now a regular feature in Ngaio. However, our birds are facing threat by Council's intention to create SNAs on private urban land under the district plan. Officers have indicated substantial incentives, including rates relief, may be required to offset the harm arising from this poor SNA policy. My calculations suggest relief alone could cost $8 million annually, a cost that council simply cannot afford. To state the obvious, if creating SNAs was a sensible policy, there would be no need for an incentives program to offset the harmful impacts from the expensive and unworkable rules, the loss of land value, and diminished goodwill. At least officers have suggested deferring the design of the incentives program for a year. The good news is that in my submission I provided several cheaper and better solutions for encouraging Indigenous biodiversity, including on private urban land. My simplest solution would see conservation efforts continue to feature strongly citywide. Landowners willingly taking care of their land without any unwanted council rules or interference. No need for council to offer expensive incentive packages, such as rates relief, to minimise harm to our flora and fauna from poor policies. Our birds thriving, perhaps with kakariki commonplace in future. This would be a low-cost solution that would be easy for council to set up and administer. I've even developed a name for the solution. I've called it the status quo. All council needs to do to lock in these better outcomes for future generations is to simply pass a motion to permanently exclude SNAs from private urban land under the district plan. And if really wanting to step up Indigenous biodiversity outcomes, council could establish a program to seek citywide planting of natives. After all, what our birds really need is a spread of food across the city, not SNAs. While this proposal will do little to reduce council's out-of-control spending in the coming financial year, it will remove the need for council to develop SNA incentives and avoid having to budget for costly rates rebates in future planning periods. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to take questions if anyone wants.
Councillor Randall.
Yes, you had a look through the annual plan. Was there any? This is new information to me about council officers outlining that there may be rates requirements to support the SNA initiative. Do you think it's a problem that the annual plan doesn't even mention that?
There is a comment buried away in the documents around SNAs. It's pretty hard to find. And basically what they said was to defer. So if we go back to last year's meeting on the proposed district plan, at that point, residential SNAs were removed for now, with council officers asked to come up with an incentives package, whilst and also waiting till the national policy statement of Indigenous biodiversity would be gazetted effectively, or if it is to be, it's still up in the air. So what they've done this year in the document is to say, there's no money, we're not going to do anything this year, let's do it next year, which is problematic actually in a sense, because the hearings for that is February next year. So now we've got a situation where incentives package will get sorted out after the hearings on the SNAs. So, it's all back to front.
No, thank you for explaining that. That's a very interesting point.
Pauiwi Kelly.
Oh, just a clarification if I can ask. So the incentives though, are you saying that council is offering incentives? Because that would be in my mind because the owner can't use that land. And so they're not being rated for that. Is that what it is?
Well, at the moment, landowners, of course, are being rated for that land because it is their land. What officers were asked to do was to come up with some form of incentives as part of the SNA's approach.
So that's from the government though, isn't it?
No, this was at the meeting. For those of you who might remember the meeting.
Thank you. We're out of time. Thanks, Steve. I'd now like to call on James Dwyer from 350 Wellington. Welcome, James. You have 10 minutes, including time for questions. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou katoa, tuatahi ngā mihi ki ngā mana whenua o tēnei rohe, kei te mihi, ki koutou kua hui mai nei i tēnei pō, ngā tangata o te kauni here o Pōneki, tēnā koutou katoa, ko James Dwyer tōku ingoa no 350 Wellington hau no reira tēnā koutou katoa. I'd actually just like to firstly acknowledge the events in Wellington this morning on Adelaide Road, so yeah, just acknowledging those people lost in that event and those affected by it, and also the council dealing with that, so kia ora. My name's James Ryan from 350 Wellington, which is a climate action group under the auspices of 350 Aotearoa. We made a submission on the annual plan, and I guess the nuts and bolts of it is if we can increase renewable localised.
Carry on.
Yeah, cool. That's all right. I guess the nuts and bolts of it was let's generate renewable energy locally. So we saw lots of projects here that had the potential to, at the same time as doing this, the particular project, to also take the opportunity and generate local renewable energy in it. And this is part of a broader campaign that 350 Aotearoa is running at the moment. And you might think that the electricity grid is sort of, renewable, 80% renewable, and that's fine, but we don't believe that there's the proper incentives in the electricity market to incentivise renewable energy, given the spot pricing mechanism means that the electricity that you buy is sold at the highest rate, and because fossil fuels generate higher costs, we think that there's a continuous incentive that they stay in the system, and we think this is further evidenced by a report produced by 350 Aotearoa and the trade unions and someone else, where it said that the gentailers, so the big electricity producers and generators, are paying out enormous dividends but not investing it back into the grid. So we don't believe the market will deliver us here, and so we think one of the solution is putting the power back into the people and making that local. We think there's huge benefits in that, in the sense of the fact that it is green, we can guarantee it's green electricity, isn't it? And also that it is a visible site in terms of local, renewable electricity, and also the resilience factor, that I think we've all seen recently, that plays a huge part as well when we have certain events. So that's really it. We think we need to take, given the climate crisis we're in, we need to take absolutely every opportunity we can to increase green renewable energy. So kia ora, thanks for having me.
Questions for James? Look, you've just done too good. Deputy Mayor Foon.
So what are the actions that council can take
Well, I mean, I firstly just want to note that in the plan you do have a climate strategy development. So I just want to acknowledge that, and you're on your pathway to, I think, carbon neutrality by 2030. So I just want to acknowledge that. I guess the actions we see you can take is that you have assets in your hands that suck up electricity from the grid, and so what we're trying to say is where you have the opportunity to make sure that you build a new building or you build a new. I think one of the examples is that we put in the submission was Greater Wellington's redid their bus at one of the bus terminals, and they put solar panels on that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is we didn't, pick out one or two of them. We just said the lens that could be applied across a lot of these projects or reconsider across these projects could be that lens. Is there an opportunity here to generate local renewable energy?
Yeah, Councillor Pannett. And, Councillor Friend, have you got a follow-up? Yeah, Councillor Pannett, off you go.
Thanks. Just really quickly, the airport continues to give us issues in terms of whether we should own it or not. What do you think about the future of aviation, and is it worthwhile keeping a stake in maintaining a transport link with the outside world?
The submission was in relation to the sort of your assets. So you're asking if we're in favour of the council maintaining ownership in the airport?
The question.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I don't think we have I'm not sure of a position. I'm happy to take that on notice and go back to the group and come back to you on that. Yeah, kia ora.
Yeah. My understanding is that Council is progressing something, and this is one of the actions in Te Atakura. So I just wonder, have you been able to follow up with our team on that? Are you working with our climate change team at all on those actions?
I think there's bits and pieces. Like I know Paddy's been working with you, and I'm quite looped in with Paddy, and he's presented to you before. So I think there is some developments there as well. Yeah. And they're all great, and I'm not saying we just see this as another opportunity to use that ability now to happy to go look at that and see that work that's being done. This was more the merrier. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Approach. Got you. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll follow up on that though.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Thank you. Kia ora.
Cool. Kia ora.
I think we're out of questions, James, but thank you so much for coming in. And I think I do recall those previous submissions from 350, and I think it's an issue we don't hear from many other organisations. So yeah, thank you.
Good, everyone. Thank you.
And now I can welcome David Harkness. Kia ora, David. Are you here on behalf of BMX or?
I was speaking for myself.
Yeah. Okay. So you've got 5 minutes. But yeah, if we have questions, we'll see how we go on time. Thanks.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Cool. So August the 4th last year, I came and co-presented a petition as Capital BMX, and in conjunction with Creswick Valley Residents Association and Kōrau Residents Association, calling for public toilets at Ian Galloway Park. So that's basically the first point. So when we presented the petition, officers wanted to wait until a master plan for Ian Galloway Park was developed before they could determine the site. We came up with a compromise position which Council voted unanimously 14-0 to say, let's investigate the placement of temporary toilets within 12 months in southern Ian Galloway Park. And I certainly left the meeting, I think everybody around the table left the meeting thinking that we were going to get temporary toilets, given that all the sewer lines were placed at with the build of the BMX track in 2015. When I followed up on this, it appears that officers have taken it to be investigation within 12 months rather than placement within 12 months. And the 150k that they reckon it will cost for the temporary facilities, I don't believe, it's certainly not in the draft annual plan. I don't believe it ever came back to you guys for any choices about whether or not to do so. So we're back waiting for the master plan. So my first point is, please can you amend the draft annual plan to include a provision for the installation of temporary toilets at the southern end of Ian Galloway Park to service the dog park, the skate ramps and the BMX track. And given that it was 12 months from last August, can you do that within the first 3 to 6 months of the annual plan, please? My second point relates to accelerating the master plan for Galway Park. So this time last year, I came and talked to you about the BMX Club and what we were trying to achieve. And part of that is trying to put in a pitch for a major event. So that will bring maybe 1,000 families to Wellington for a number of days, up to a week. And there's obviously economic benefit to that. There's a 3-year lead time. So May 15th, so yesterday, was the date to be able to pitch for 2026 nationals. What I need is the master plan for the area to understand the placement of a number of things to enable us to put in a credible pitch. The work programme was full. She said, can't do it by December 22. We'll do it in 23, 24. It's not in this annual plan as one of the projects. So I guess whilst the BMX Club started engaging with other stakeholders focused around the toilets, we've actually ended up working together with over a dozen organisations, having a public meeting. We've got the basis for an annual plan. I've got a 25-slide deck. You've got 2 or 3 of the slides represented up on the screen in front of you. But again, when I talked to officers last month, they're saying they're going to start the scoping of a master plan in the next financial year. There's no commitment to completion. So I guess I'm looking for a regional scale pump track next to the BMX track as the anchor point for a wheels hub, like the one in Cambridge or the one that's just opened in Christchurch. I'm ready to start raising the money to fund this. I want a BMX major event for the club and for the city, but there's a 3-year lead time. I want to work with the other stakeholders that we've already started talking to build and develop a sport and recreation hub that will benefit the whole of the city. But I can't do it until there's some commitment from you guys as landowners. So my second ask, can you just get on with it? Sorry to be very blunt, but yeah, I thought it was in plan for this year. There's no evidence of it. There's only a sort of a vague commitment to start scoping something. So please, can you put the money into the plan, either to put another planner on a fixed term contract or hire a consulting organisation to do what it's going to take the work that's already been started, finalise it, consult it, and get it ready for implementation. And then we can unleash the power of the community and bring in that external fundraising capability.
Right, we have time for a quick question from Councillor Calvert.
Thanks, Dave. And this is about the temporary toilets that the council looked at last year. So at the time, and I think just probably for the benefit of the people around here who weren't around here at the table last year, but you have about 3,000 users in that southern part of Galloway Park a week.
That's what the coffee cart guy with his cameras estimated. There's 3,000 to 5,000 users a week using the dog park and the other sporting facilities. And so we put in a petition. It was the 3rd highest number of signatories in the last 7 years.
And can you just tell me where the council provided toilets actually are and whether they're open or not?
There's a set of changing rooms on the mid part of the West Rugby space. So it's about 500 metres from across sort of rugby pitch and a bit to get there. It's indeterminate whether those will be open or not. So in December, a little sign went up saying, there's a map to where the toilets are located. It's probably just as quick to go up Randwick Street to Northland.
And that's really where the kids are going?
Well, no, the kids are going in the bushes behind the track, and that's what the residents' associations are saying. We don't really need to look at this. And it's, there's an equality thing or an equity thing there as well. The little boys don't mind so much. The little girls maybe do it once when they're desperate, and then they say, I don't want to go back to BMX, or I don't want to go back to skating.
Thanks, David. We're out of time. I have asked staff to follow up, given there's a decision already on the books, and so I've asked them to have a look at that immediately as a result of your submission. Thank you. We'll now go online to Linwood Chung, and you have 5 minutes. That would include any time for questions. Thank you.
Right. My representation here is a ratepayer. I represent
out of our ownership of 24 ratepayers, and the majority are retail and businesses. And the cost of rates has really affected the retailers and the businesses. And during that time, the assistance with regarding car parking and other areas where the people come in, it has been very, very tough on that. So my push is really just to try and reduce that cost during the coming years, and to try and keep expenditure down to the minimum amount, working on pretty well zero-based budgeting. And going forward, when there is a surplus at a later date, then all these little frilly things can be spent on. There isn't a day that doesn't go by where the retailers are rearranging and trying to sort out their business to try and make things worthwhile. One of our current one has actually been changing their shop in many ways just to increase their profitability. Now, going on to the submission that we put forward, the essential items that the council should put through always, and that's the number one, is the utilities. Councils were formed so that we could collate and put all the services that could never ever be done individually, and they're the number one, and we can't sort of lose track of that. So on point number one, we need to fix the water pipes. That we recognise that is the number one, but we do have to find savings elsewhere. We have to live within our means and not increase the debt. Debts only come back to bite us, especially with the interest rates actually rising, and it's a burden that's very hard to shake off. On the second item, and that is with regarding the bike routes, so it's very nice to actually have that, and I'm a cyclist myself, and it's great. But the reality is that you've got to cover for the basic cost first. The bread and butter has to be covered first. Onto the third area, we have to get the Golden Mile, Thornton Quay, all the businesses run through those areas, and there's a tremendous amount of rates that actually are paid by these retailers. They do need to have the city running smoothly, and they've got to be able to have the customers coming in, and that's why one of the items I mentioned earlier is the car parking. People have to be able to get there, to park, to actually to shop. If you don't allow the people to come in to shop, and in a lot of cases you can't bus in, you can't carry a table home. On to the point number 4 regarding the demolition and strengthening. These items, they don't actually add value. Sure, it's always nice to actually get the flash buildings and to have these items in place, but you have to leave it until the businesses are flourishing, and then we can actually spend the money. On the support for the increase in the rates, I do acknowledge that we have to increase the rates, but you have to go through the rates and any of the expenditure and any of the non-essential, and essential of course is the water and the rubbish and various others, because that's basically what council always started. So basically, to summarise, we just have to spend only what we can afford, and we have to live within our means. It's like any other budget. And that's about it. If you have any sort of questions or anything you want to sort of come back to me on.
I'm not seeing any questions, Linwood, but thank you for taking the time to give your submission. We appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Bye.
And I believe A. Bramley, welcome. You're next, and you can either be at the table or at the podium, whichever you'd prefer, as long as you have a green light on your microphone, and you have 5 minutes, including any time for questions.
Thank you for having me. Look, I'm essentially seeking more data. I'm looking at shoving personally 100 to 150,000 K down the councils more in the next 10 years. and a lot of other people will be doing the same, that's hurting people. It really is. So I think that our consultations need a lot more information in them, and we need a lot better process to find out what the community is actually thinking. Now, people vote for a direction of travel. They don't necessarily vote for a specific item. And I think I'd like every councillor here to remember the Basin Reserve flyover. Now, the council thought that was a great idea, the staff thought that was a great idea, and the community didn't. Now, who now thinks that is a good idea? So, you know, we've got to be mindful of what people think. But specifically, when you're looking at consultation, I'd like to see demographic data. I'd like to see location data. And some grouping like suburban residential, suburban shops, age group 0 to 13. If you look at something like Frank Kitts Park and the library, we've spent $9 million on Frank Kitts Park, 0 to 13 age group. We took half the library and put that into Capital E. 20,000 people go to Capital E. 3.9 million visit the library. But when we look at the money we spent on the Little E's, would that have been better spread around the community? Maybe we needed more of it in Tawa. We just don't know, and it makes it very difficult to make decent submissions on anything. If we look at user charges, we've got our sports groups refusing to pay. Now, I find that a bit rude because the rest of us have to pay, but historically public money has gone very much on adult working age males. Now, in an entire lifetime of work, socially and all the rest of it, I've known 2 women who have played sport netball after work and 3 that played business house. So what demographic are we doing there? Some of the consultations around this really do focus on sports teams. They don't focus on women who maybe go to a dance class for a couple of hours. So are we disproportionately spending council money on something that is only enjoyed by a small group of the community? We had the thing the other day where 70% of the councillors are going, we favour the community favours cycling. 70% think they don't. We're spending $321 million on that. We need to do better, I think, and find out who is. Now, how do we do it? I did wonder about an expert finance advisory group to help draw up, allocate hard data. Consultation should at least have a budget on them. That would be very nice. Should have a throughput. How many playgrounds are we doing for this? What's that made up of? Interest, depreciation? I mean, as playgrounds, as far as I can make out, we spend about $250 per playground per week on maintaining them. Is that realistic? Good amount? Bad amount? Don't know. So really, that's probably the basis of my submission, that unless we know what the community is thinking, and we elect people usually on the least worst alternative, we've all ticked that box, who would be worse than this person, it doesn't mean that we're necessarily reinforcing any councillor's desire for their own pet project. So that's me.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Councillor Chung.
Great, thank you very much for that. It's very enlightening. I enjoyed that. What do you think we should be spending money on? And yeah, I guess I'd rather ask that question rather than what do you think we shouldn't be spending money on?
Okay, basic services have to come first. If your community isn't healthy in the sense of water, rubbish collection, things like that, that is a real issue. If it's transport, honestly, the whole country's transport policy seems to be by the boys, for the boys. We're doing nothing about company car parks in the middle of town. I mean, I'd like to actually see a parking thing on the middle of town, non-residential, non-service car parks. We approve buildings. While we have those car parks, they suck traffic in the rush hour every morning. Sinking lid on those would actually get rid of a lot of our morning traffic. More buses, because they cater to everybody pretty much. I was watching Lambton Quay on my way up, 2 cyclists, and behind them waiting were 2 buses, both full. So, yeah, that, and then everybody needs a bit. But I think we have to watch with this sort of thing, that we're not spending too much there and not enough here. Does that answer your question, Councillor? Thank you very much. Thank you.
I think we're out of time, sorry. So thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time to give your submission, share your thoughts with us. And lucky last, we have Connor Malloy from the New Zealand Taxpayers Association online. Welcome, Connor. You have 10 minutes, and that includes time for questions.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
All right. Thank you very much, councillors, for having me. Just before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge those that passed away, unfortunately, last night with the events of last night, and a big thanks to all the first responders and sympathies to the family. So I'm Connor Malloy, the Deputy Campaigns Manager at the Taxpayers Union, and I'm submitting today to oppose the eye-watering 12.3% rates hike that ratepayers will be facing. We're in the middle of a cost of living crisis. People's mortgages are going up, rents are going up. These rate hikes, in the end, are eventually paid by renters. So this isn't just going to impact landlords or people that own their own properties. It will affect everyone that lives in Wellington, and so we are particularly concerned about that. Last time we submitted, my colleague joked that you may have to sell off the zoo animals to pay for the rising costs of running this council. Unfortunately, this is becoming even more of looking like a possibility due to the direction that this council is going. So for what I'm going to do today is just walk through a couple of ways that we think that you'll be able to look to find savings in the council and generate a bit more revenue for the council to cover your costs and to pay for necessary infrastructure rather than just nice to haves. So the first thing is for those nice to have projects, they should be cancelled or delayed. I'm thinking of things like the Golden Mile, some of our cycleways and things. They should be considered on whether or not they can be delayed in order to help the council pay some of its debt and fund our vital infrastructure. Those nice to haves can be saved for another time. Another thing you can do is consider cancelling memberships of other organisations such as Local Government New Zealand. Auckland Council recently did that. We believe that you should be following their lead. The other thing is in terms of climate policy. I know Wellington wants to be a world leader in climate change. I just caution that because of the ETS, if any of your climate policies are dealing with areas that are already governed by our emissions trading scheme, such as transport emissions or electricity or anything like that, all those policies will do is reduce emissions in Wellington, but free up carbon credits to be used in other councils elsewhere or in other industries elsewhere around the country. So any like climate policies that deal with areas already governed by the ETS should strictly be focused on, will this save the council money? In certain cases, it probably will if you're switching to a cheaper form of electricity generation or something like that, but it should be done strictly on costs, not on climate impact, because that is already governed by the emissions trading scheme. Another big cost for the library and essentially a wasted asset is our central library. During the repairs of that and the earthquake, the lack of structural integrity with the library, we saw these great pop-up libraries come up around the city. These have a couple of benefits of they're scalable. During the good times, you can have more of them. And then, when times are a bit tougher, you can scale them back a bit. They're more accessible. They're in more locations around the city. But critically, they're a lot cheaper to run and can be tailored specifically to the needs of the community. And so I touched on that a bit more deeply in my written submission. But just on those council assets, the council owns a lot of property. And that firstly exposes ratepayers to a lot of risk if there's a downturn in the property market, but also the big one, an earthquake, that puts ratepayers on the hook for a lot of potential risk. And so we think that we should rationalise some of those assets, consider selling some off, or see if we can do some long-term leases and the likes on those kinds of things. Privatisation of council services, I know that's a scary word, or council assets. There's an advisory group, an economic advisory, that recently did a submission, did an analysis of selling Auckland's port into a mixed ownership model. That could be something that the council could be looking at. If any councillors want me to send that report to them, I would be happy to. But these are all options. When we're faced with a 12.3% rate hike, nothing should be off the table. So some of the above savings will help find money to fund our infrastructure without needing to hike rates as much. Another idea that the Taxpayers Union has been a strong proponent of is actually allowing councils to have more money, get more money from central government through schemes such as GST sharing is one example that has been put forward. We know that when development occurs, central government gets all of the benefit of the income tax, company tax, GST, yet local government unfortunately has to bear all of the costs of that with the associated infrastructure and things, and only gets some rates in return. So we would like to see the council actively lobbying central government for more support in that kind of area that is linked to development and is linked to anything that is increasing the need for infrastructure. The other thing is in terms of like transparency and accountability. We've seen in councils all around the country where councillors on their own council have had to legoima their own council to get basic information. We don't think that that's right. We think that the council should be reviewing its transparency and accountability systems and treat the councillors with some respect and give them access to information on a far more sped up process than under the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act. The last thing I would like to comment on is the fact that as councillors, you work for the people, you do not work for the chief executive. Comments in councils around the country, particularly in Gore and even in your own council, of chief executives trying to steer discussion away from particular things is something that we think is not appropriate. And we think that as councillors, it is important that you show courage and stand up to the chief executive, particularly when threatened with codes of conduct and legal lists and things like that.
We're focused here on the annual plan, so I do have some questions if you've come to the end.
Yeah, just on that. But I think this issue is intrinsically linked to the annual plan. Like when there's talks about particular councillors being excluded from discussion on the annual plan when they're elected representatives and the officials aren't elected representatives, I think that's an important thing to consider going forward, because it is a threat to our democracy. But yes, I am happy to take any questions.
Councillor McNulty.
Oh, thanks, Connor. Two questions, quite quick ones. Given your organisation's links, I suppose, into the centre-right of New Zealand politics, how are you going with your advocacy for GST on rates with those parties?
Sorry, you mean that the fact that rates have GST on them?
Yeah, so you're talking about GST sharing schemes or along those lines. How have you found your advocacy with other parties in Parliament around that?
So the rates are essentially, to the extent that they're providing services that could be provided privately, such as like rubbish collection and things like that, there probably should be GST on that, so that there is equity with that. But we would support that GST going back into the councils.
Okay. And in terms of, in your opinion, if we have a cycleway project where we get a 90% investment from central government, so we're only doing 10%, is that a prudent investment?
I mean, so from the ratepayer's perspective, that it potentially could be, but I would just caution the fact that if these kinds of projects are going ahead where taxpayers are bearing the cost of projects that aren't running a cost-benefit analysis just in and of their own, you face the risk of other councils doing the same thing, and it ends up costing your ratepayers even more when they pay for similarly unviable, similar projects in other councils where the costs far outweigh the benefits.
Thank you.
I think we're pretty much out of time, Connor, but I appreciate you taking the time to come and speak with us today. We're really glad that you did. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
All right, councillors, we are now at the end. We now need to do the vote to extend the duration of this meeting, so because it goes tomorrow, but luckily for us, we also are going to adjourn it, so we don't need to stay here all night. So do I have a seconder for this motion? Thank you, Councillor McNulty. And we will vote to extend the meeting beyond 6 hours and to adjourn until tomorrow morning. Thank you, everybody. I'll do a karakia tomorrow at the end of the real meeting, and have a lovely evening. And yeah, again, our thoughts are with everybody in Newtown, and our appreciation to the mayor who's done the hard yards today. Thank you.